Ooh, I'm short. Hello. I switched chairs, so I have to adjust the camera. That'll work. Hello. Thank you for the host, V. Hope things are well. Going well for you. Hello. How are you this afternoon? It is not morning. How are you this afternoon? I'm going to move the mic closer to me in hopes that that will make things better. Not entirely sure if it will, because it's not that much closer. And I don't know if it's the direction the mic is. Things are good today. That's good. Glad to hear that. That might actually be better. Does that sound any better? I just need to get this set up. I really need to get it set up because I might want to work in here when I'm doing school. So that would be a good goal to do in the next couple weeks before class starts. So I have a couple things that I'm drinking this morning. I have a mango juice drink, the Arizona Tea Company, and then I have my House Black from the Scented Leaf, which has like orange and all sorts of things. Sounds fine to me. Okay. Thank you. I don't have it up anymore. I'm going to share with you though, because I'm a nerd. Browse teas. The black tea. Is the House Black. Fine Chinese Congo. Black teas are blended with orange blossoms, red sandalwood, elderberry, passion fruit, and other flavors to produce a tea that is fruity and aromatic. It's really good. It's very good. I'm not sure if I'm gonna stick with this music, because if I remember correctly, we left off. What is Morty Barbecue? Morty Barbecue is the name that Terror came up with for our main suspect in the haunted bridge, Mortimer Bardescu. Yeah. So it's Morty Barbecue. That's right, I did. Speak of the devil. Hi Terry, how are you? Very excited about this tea. They're gonna have to grill him to make sure he's not the baddie. Yep. Morty Barbecue. So yeah, if I remember correctly, we left off with some tense scenes, and so I picked out some more atmospheric music. Marinate him with that truth. Preach, girl. And I'm upset because this book is destroyed, but it came that way. And there's a trunk missing out of the front. But anyways, we are on chapter 16. Trying to remember, but I just always assume if we left off somewhere in a Nancy Drew book, her car just crashed or something. Exactly. Yeah. Nancy was asking Ned to do something. Oh yeah, they found a guy in the forest area outside of a cabin with a gun, and it seems like he shot himself or something, and they took him back to the cabin, and he's like unconscious. And they call the doctor, and Ned showed up. Sorry, I thought I was gonna sneeze. And Ned and his friends volunteered to take care of him, and Nancy asked Ned to listen to anything that the dude, Mr. Haley, says while he's unconscious. So that is where we left off. So I'm gonna switch over the music. To the atmospheric. And we should get started. I don't know how long I'm gonna stream. Probably need to at least maybe an hour and a half. So I may stream an hour and a half before I get ready for work. And now I'm all congested. This music is very dramatic, yes. Sup, Hugh! Hugh, how are you? I have not seen you in a long time. Welcome for joining, and glad you're here. I'm just about to start reading. We're on chapter 16, and it is called An Unwanted Gift. And we have the music that is dramatic. I'm doing fantastic, that's good. I am okay. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff right now. Let me know if the music's too loud. I'll turn it down a little bit. Yeah, just let me know. It is good to see you. And I need to write down the timing. Alright. Without further ado, here's chapter 16. By the way, Dad, did you win your tennis match with Mr. Bardescu? Nancy asked curiously as the car bumped along the road on its way back to the Deer Mountain Hotel. No, he defeated me 2 out of 3 sets, Mr. Drew admitted ruefully. Oh, I was almost certain you'd beat him, Dad. He must be a good player. Far better than I expected. We had a few close decisions as to whether balls were inside or outside the court, but I'm offering no alibis. Nancy could easily imagine that Mortimer Bardescu would claim the benefit of any doubtful shot. She knew, too, that her father was too good a sport to argue with an opponent. A defeat now and then is good for anyone, Mr. Drew laughed lightly. I don't believe in taking games too seriously. At the hotel, after parting with the doctor, the lawyer explained to Nancy that it would be necessary for him to visit the nearby village to see about an important matter in connection with the jewel theft case. May I go there with you? Nancy inquired eagerly. Mr. Drew smilingly shook his head. I can't take you along this time, my dear. Thank you for the follow. I can't take you along this time, my dear. Anyway, you should be resting up for your match tomorrow. After her father had driven away, Nancy and her chums inquired at the hotel desk to learn if any mail had arrived on the afternoon train. It was found that Bess and George had received letters from their parents, while for Nancy there was a note and a package. She studied the handwriting on them curiously. I'd say it's from Mortimer Bardescu, George chuckled. He's always trying to win your favor. Neither the envelope nor the package is addressed in his handwriting, Nancy replied. That is, in any of his varied handwritings, for it always seems to be different. Hurry up and open the box, Bess advised impatiently. I can't imagine what it contains. At last, Nancy had the wrapper removed. She held up a golf ball for her chums to see. Well, of all things to send a person, this takes the prize. The gift unquestionably had come from Mortimer Bardescu, for his name was autographed neatly across the face of the golf ball. The note must explain about it, Bess declared. Read it and see, Nancy. The girl tore open the letter and found a 2-line message from Mortimer Bardescu. I shall read it in his voice. "I am sending you this ball to replace the one which you lost," he wrote. "Use it in the tournament tomorrow and win." "Well, of all the conceit!" Nancy Drew exclaimed indignantly. "I guess he thinks his autograph is just as important as Jimmy Harlow's." "Will you play with the ball tomorrow?" Bess inquired mischievously. "Certainly not. I'd like to send it back to him." "That's what I'd do," George nodded. "Tell him you don't need any lucky ball to win the tournament." "No, I believe I'll keep this little souvenir after all," Nancy announced after a moment's thought. "It will serve as a specimen of Mr. Bardescu's handwriting. I'm interested in collecting as many of them as possible." "Why does that man always use varied signatures?" Bess questioned in perplexity. "His handwriting never seems to be the same twice." "I have a theory that he may be a forger," Nancy said in an undertone. "Perhaps my idea is a wild one, but how else can one explain it?" "Why not report the man to the police?" George suggested promptly. Nancy shook her head. "No, we can't do that. After all, a theory is not a proven fact. Besides, by playing a waiting game, we may learn far more than we would if we were to expose the man immediately." In a fanciful flight of imagination, she could visualize Mortimer Bardescu linked with the international jewel thief gang. The man's acquaintance with the mysterious Margaret Judson, as well as his manner of altering his signature, pointed to such a conclusion. "Undoubtedly he came here to the Deer Mountain Hotel so that he might work with that woman," Nancy told herself. "I'll never again have another thing to do with Mortimer Bardescu." However, a few minutes later, as she was thinking over the matter in her room, the girl laughed at her own decision. After all, she had no evidence against Mortimer Bardescu. Even if he were a forger, that would be no reason for her avoiding him. On the contrary, if she considered herself anything of a detective, she should make every effort to gain additional evidence to support her theory. By means of Mr. Bardescu, I might be able to trace Margaret Judson, Nancy reflected soberly, and I must find her. Impulsively, she sprang up from her chair. Slipping into her coat, she hastened downstairs. There was no time to tell her chums what she meant to do, for the bus for town would leave the hotel door in less than 5 minutes. Nancy was the last passenger aboard, and as the vehicle pulled away, she wondered if she were making a mistake to act without waiting to consult her father. At the village, she alighted and entered a drugstore. After making a purchase, she stepped into a telephone booth. She stood there debating for a moment, a trifle fearful of what she was about to do. Then, summoning her courage, she called the Deer Mountain Hotel and asked to speak with Mortimer Bardescu. It will be just my luck for him to be out, she thought anxiously. A minute later, she heard the man's voice at the other end of the line. "Hello, who is it?" he demanded impatiently, as Nancy, momentarily overcome by nervousness, remained silent. "This is Miss Judson," Nancy stammered, trying to speak in a nasal tone. "Your voice doesn't sound natural." "I have a very bad cold. Can you hear me now?" "Yes. What is it that you wish, Miss Judson? You know it isn't a good idea to call me here at the hotel." "I must speak with you about a very important matter. Can you meet tonight?" "Well, I had planned another engagement," Mr. Bardescu grumbled, "but I suppose I can. Where shall we meet?" "The same place as before." "What's the matter with 2BX Gardenia?" the man asked. Nancy was nonplussed at such a reply, and for a moment could think of nothing to say. Messed my throat up. She had not the slightest idea as to the meaning of 2BX Gardenia. In sheer desperation, she mumbled into the telephone, "Nothing but the weather," and hung up the receiver before Mr. Bardescu could make any response. As Nancy walked to the bus stop, she felt thoroughly irritated at the outcome of the telephone conversation. Had she betrayed herself to Mortimer Bardescu? What can be the meaning of 2BX Gardenia? She speculated. It must be a code word to designate a meeting place. The telephone conversation had served one purpose at least. to convince Nancy that Margaret Judson and Mortimer Bartescue were working together in some nefarious business which would not bear the light of honest investigation. Excuse me. I must learn more, she told herself, and the only way is to follow Mortimer Bartescue tonight and find out where he goes. Returning to the hotel, Nancy explained her plan to Bess and George. Her intention was to borrow Ned Nickerson's car and use it to follow Mr. Bartescue when he should go to keep his appointment with Margaret Judson. The car was parked near the hotel exit to be ready at a moment's notice. The girls then went to dinner as usual, and were pleased to observe that Mortimer Bartescue had entered the dining room ahead of them. Before the girls were even half through dinner, Mr. Bartescue abruptly arose and left the dining room. "We'll not take dessert tonight," Nancy said hurriedly to the waiter. The chums reached the lobby in time to see the man depart by the front door. They saw him glance anxiously at his wristwatch as he stepped into his automobile. "He intends to keep an appointment, all right," Nancy declared in satisfaction. "Come on, girls, we must move fast or he'll be out of sight." They ran to their own parked car and had it started in a twinkling. The other automobile had vanished down the road, but Nancy drove rapidly and soon came within view of it again. "He seems to be heading for the village," she observed aloud. "Don't take your eyes from that taillight." Apparently unaware that he was being followed, Bartescue drove into town, parking his auto across the street from a moving picture theater. Nancy halted nearly a half block away lest she be observed. The girls saw the man look at his watch again, then cross the street and enter the amusement place. "Do you suppose he expects to meet Miss Judson inside the building?" Bess asked in disappointment. "Perhaps he's just attending a show." "Wait here and I'll find out," Nancy said, sliding from behind the steering wheel. She bought an admission ticket to the theater and went inside. "A tall, dark man just entered a moment ago," she said to the usher. "Can you show me where he's seated?" "You must be mistaken," the usher replied politely. "The last persons were 2 girls, and before them an elderly couple." Nancy knew that Mortimer Bartescue had entered the theater, even though the usher could not recall him by her description. In the darkened room, she was unable to distinguish faces. Thinking that possibly the man might have gone to the lounge to keep his appointment with Margaret Judson, she went there. The room was empty. In perplexity, Nancy returned to the lobby, and after standing there for several minutes, she finally decided to join her chums again. She left the theater and crossed the street. Suddenly, she halted in astonishment, staring blankly at the place where she had parked Ned's car. Bess, George, and the automobile had vanished. That is end of chapter 16. And I really need a drink. Music is tense and epic, but not too loud. Okay. Hubby's drunk. Thank you for the follow. Yes, thank you for the follow. Oh, my thing actually did update. That's cool. Be helpful, Mr. Barbecue. Nasal Nancy voice. Startle that car, Nancy. Welcome for clapping or clasping. I may have to blow my nose because I don't know what happened, but when I needed to sneeze, it just all got congested. So, I'm gonna mute the mic and I'll be right back. I don't know if that's gonna help, but... Oh, it was in between music. Okay, bye, be safe, have fun, miss you lots. Yeah! I'm back. Guys, quick question. What is a really solid, reliable external hard drive to get? I am not the person to ask. Keegan would be the person to ask. But I don't know what he's at work, so I'm not sure what he's doing. Perfect. The tea is so good. And I haven't even been experimenting with adding honey or sugar or anything like that. Because it's really good as is. This is good stakeout music. Just thought I'd ask because I'm currently too lazy to go to the Staples website. I'm sure you could Google it and find some reviews. Mood. No, the Buffalo Mini Station Extreme NFC is supposed to be pretty good. What Terry said, because I trust Terry. I like honey in my tea. Yeah, just like a slight, subtle hint of honey or sugar. Like, if I do put sugar in my tea, put very little. Okay, so chapter 17 is called The Missing Car. Excuse me. And we are starting it at 30:16. Nancy was dismayed for an instant. Sorry, I'm trying to handle the book as best as I can, but it's difficult with it being separated. Okay. Nancy was dismayed for an instant, fearing that during her absence harm had befallen her chums. However, a little sober reflection convinced her that George and Bess must have driven off somewhere deliberately. Very likely Mortimer Bardescu came out of the theater shortly after I went inside, she reasoned. The girls may have decided to trail him. Nancy's position was an awkward one, for without a car she was temporarily stranded in the village. A bus would not make the run back to the Deer Mountain Hotel for nearly an hour. Since there seemed to be nothing else for her to do, Nancy entered a nearby drugstore. Seating herself by a window, she ordered an ice cream soda. She hoped that by the time she should have finished it, Bess and George would have returned. Half an hour elapsed, and still there was no sign of the missing car. Nancy glanced anxiously at her watch. The bus would soon be due, and she must decide whether to return to the hotel or continue her vigil. George and Bess may not come back for hours, she told herself. I believe I'd better return to the hotel. Nancy paid for the soda and stepped out on the street again. As she made her way toward the bus stop, she heard the screech of brakes. Then a car came to a sudden halt by the curb. "Nancy!" called the voice. She whirled about to see Ned Nickerson, who had driven up. He was driving his own machine. "Why, Ned, how did you get here?" The boy sprang out to open the car door for her. "Bess and George sent me after you," he explained. "They're back at the hotel." "At the hotel? Well, I like the way they deserted me." "They didn't mean to run off, but right after you left, Mortimer Bardescu came out of the theater by a side door. The girls knew you were eager to trail him, so they followed in the car. "Where did he go?" Nancy inquired feverishly. "He merely drove back to the hotel. I happened to be there when the girls arrived, for I wanted to talk to you. They asked me to come back after you." "I'm disappointed at the way Mortimer Bardescu gave us the slip," Nancy said impatiently. "I wonder if he didn't suspect he was being followed after all." Suddenly recalling that Ned had said he wished to talk to her, she anxiously inquired if the old man at the cabin had taken a turn for the worse. "He seems about the same, Nancy, but he's been talking a great deal. He revealed his name as Joe Haley." "And did you take down his words, Ned?" "Yes. His mutterings were so strange that I thought you'd want to hear them right away. I have everything he said written down on paper. His most startling words were these: Miss Margaret, I'm afraid the box was stolen. Don't cry, Miss Margaret. Why don't you marry Morton? Are you sure the name was Morton? Nancy asked quickly. It couldn't have been Mortimer? It might have been. I admit I didn't hear what he said very clearly. Ned, I forgot to ask you about Mr. Bartescue. Did you look to see if his name appears in the social register? I looked for it, but it wasn't there. I imagine the fellow's just a windbag. I suspected it all along, Ned, but his connection with Margaret Judson amazes me. There are some angles to the case which I can't fathom. During the ride back to the hotel, Nancy told the young man as much as she could about the affair which had brought her father to the Deer Mountain Hotel. Some of the facts in her possession were confidential. Without Mr. Drew's permission, she would not divulge them. When you return to Mr. Haley's cabin, listen closely to anything he may say regarding Margaret Judson, she urged. I will, Ned promised, and if I learn anything worthwhile, I will report to you at once. During Nancy's absence from the hotel, Carson Drew had returned from a fruitless journey at Hemlock Hall. I acted upon a tip, he explained to Nancy as they talked together in his room late that night. It was a worthless one, as usual. You seem tired and discouraged this evening, Dad. I'm a little fed up with this case. To tell you the truth, I half suspect we've been on the wrong track from the first. How do you mean? I doubt that Margaret Judson has anything to do with the affair. There's no real evidence to support our theory that the brass chest belonged to her. I'm inclined to get back to my legal work on this particular case and let the New York detectives solve their own problem as to how to locate the guilty persons. After all, that's not my business. I was merely trying to help out. I rather enjoyed doing the detective work, Nancy said regretfully. There's no reason why you can't go on with it. I simply haven't the time myself. I don't suppose I can glean many clues after we're back at River Heights, Nancy said ruefully. Oh, we'll not be leaving here for a few days. You still have plenty of time, both for your detective work and the golf tournament. Speaking of golf, I guess I should be getting to bed, Nancy declared with a gay laugh. Tomorrow I face the crucial test, and I must be rested. How does your hand feel? Her father inquired anxiously. Did you see the doctor? Yes, he let me take off the bandage, but said I must be very careful or the old pain would come back. It's a shame you must play with such a handicap, Mr. Drew said sympathetically. I'm banking on you to win anyway. Thanks, Dad, Nancy smiled as she turned away. I'll do my best, you may be sure of that. She dropped in for a moment at her chum's room. George was writing letters, while Bess, propped up with pillows, had been reading in bed. Is your story a good one? Nancy inquired with interest. It's supposed to be a serious book, and I can't make head nor tail of it, Bess complained. Here, take a look at the crazy thing. She gave the book a careless toss, expecting that her chum would catch it. Nancy had been looking in another direction, and before she could make a move, the heavy volume had struck her injured hand. Oh! She exclaimed, trying to smother a cry of pain. Bess leaped from bed and ran to her chum's side. Oh, Nancy, I didn't mean to do it, she wailed. Your poor finger. I thought you were watching when I tossed the book. Don't blame yourself, Nancy said, trying to smile. It'll stop hurting in a minute. I'll never forgive myself, Bess said contritely. I don't know what possessed me to do such a thing. The finger feels better already, Nancy assured her chum kindly. Please don't worry about it, Bess. But your match tomorrow. The pain will go away before then, I'm sure. Jump back into bed, Bess, and forget it. Somewhat reassured, Bess did as she was bidden. She had no idea that Nancy actually suffered far more intense pain than she would admit. A little later, in her own room, Nancy prepared for bed, but she was unable to sleep. The ache in her hand steadily grew worse until she paced the floor from sheer nervousness. This'll never do, she told herself sternly. I must get some sleep or I'll never be able to play tomorrow. The hour was still early, so Nancy decided to dress and seek the house physician. Without troubling either her father or her chums, she went to Dr. Ackerman's office. What have you been doing to this hand? He inquired sternly. I can't read today. Nancy explained about the accident and was dismayed when the man shook his head sadly, as if to indicate that there was little he could do for her. I hope you're not planning to play in the golf tournament tomorrow, Miss Drew. Oh, but I am, Doctor. Please, you'll not refuse me permission. That's a matter for you to decide, Miss Drew. Your injury will not prove a permanent one, but I should judge that you suffer excruciating pain. I do, Nancy admitted ruefully. I was hoping you could help relieve it. There's very little I can do except put on another bandage. It will require time to heal. The pain is so acute I haven't been able to sleep. I can give you something for that, the doctor said. A mild sleeping potion will help you rest during the night, and perhaps by morning the pain will have lessened considerably. Nancy thanked the doctor, and when she was back in her room again, she took the medicine as directed. Soon she dropped into sleep and did not awaken until the sun streamed into the window the following morning. As she opened her eyes, she heard someone rapping on a door. May George and I come in? Bess called. Not dressed yet? George asked in surprise. Then, as she noticed how tired and wan her chum appeared, she added quickly, Nancy, you've had a bad night. I slept fairly well after the doctor gave me some medicine. The doctor? Bess exclaimed in dismay. Oh, Nancy, you didn't let on that your hand hurt you very much. Why did I have to do a dreadful thing like that? Now don't start worrying, Nancy said firmly. It hurts only a little this morning, and I intend to play in the golf tournament anyway. But you'll be badly handicapped, Bess wailed. It isn't fair at all. Nancy refused to say anything more about her injury and started to dress. George and Bess put on her shoes for her and tried in every way to assist her so that she would not need to use her sore hand. You'll have just enough time to eat breakfast and reach the first tee, George advised, glancing at her watch. It's rather late. The girls hastened down to the dining room. Scarcely had they seated themselves when Nancy glimpsed Sammy Sutter coming timidly toward her. Excuse me for bothering you, Miss Drew, but I want to talk to you about something important. Today's match? Nancy questioned with a smile, looking up from the menu card. The boy shook his head. No, it's about Miss Judson. My mother is here in the lobby, and she has something to tell you about the woman. Nancy arose abruptly, her eyes alight with anticipation. Don't wait breakfast for me. Don't wait breakfast for me, she told Bess and George. I'll go with Sammy, for this may be important. End of chapter 17. Thank you for welcoming me back. Chapter 17 hype. So much caps! Morton, that's a salty name if I ever heard one. I've never heard Morton as a first name, but I knew somebody in elementary school that had it as a last name. Alright, just found some very cheap, reliable, and sizable hard drives on Amazon. Very excited. Hope they do you well for what you need them for. Indeed. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure there's nothing super important in my notifications. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add to that. Is anyone eating or drinking anything interesting that they'd like to share? Also, I guess I could say that I did go to the doctor for my cat bite this morning, and she's not too concerned about it, but she gave me a script for an antibiotic just in case over the weekend it somehow looks like it's infected and like if it gets worse instead of better. Since it's the weekend and I don't want to have to go to like urgent care, but it should be fine. So that's good. I just wanted to not worry about it and have peace of mind. Sorry. But anyways, I'll continue on with chapter 18. I just don't know how to hold the book because I don't want to damage it worse than it's already damaged and awkward. But anyways, try to hold it like this, I guess. Chapter 18 is called Caught by the Storm. What have you learned about Miss Margaret Judson? Nancy inquired eagerly as she led Mrs. Samuel Sutter Sr. to a secluded nook in the hotel lobby. Do you know where she's living now? No, Miss Drew, the woman admitted. That's what I want to talk with you about. The girl looked puzzled, and Mrs. Sutter hastened to explain her purpose in coming to the hotel. She had learned from the village postmistress that several letters which were in the same handwriting, and all addressed to Margaret Judson, were being held for lack of a forwarding address. I thought you might have found out where the woman lives, Miss Drew. Oh, no, Nancy answered, trying not to disclose her annoyance. I'm as much in the dark as ever. It was clear to her now that Mrs. Sutter had come not to impart information, but to learn if she possibly could. Sorry, this is a weird sentence. It was clear to her now that Mrs. Sutter had come not to impart information, but to learn if she possibly could why Nancy was interested in Margaret Judson. She cleverly avoided the woman's questions, but could not help feeling provoked because so much time had been wasted. I wonder if this lady is Margaret Judson. I really know almost nothing about Margaret Judson, she told Mrs. Sutter. I'm not even familiar with the name of the professor to whom she was engaged. I heard it once, but I can't recall it now, Mrs. Sutter said regretfully. She seemed in a mood to prolong the conversation, but Nancy cut her short by explaining that her chums were waiting for her at the breakfast table. Bess and George had just finished their meal. Since it was now so late, Nancy ordered nothing more than breakfast rolls. You can't win a golf tournament on a diet like that, Bess protested. There's no time for more. I wasted 20 minutes with Mrs. Sutter and learned practically nothing. The woman is a gossip, I fear, and merely wished to gather information about Miss Judson so she could spread it about. The girls hastened to the golf office, there to find the tournament chairman talking earnestly with a group of men and women players who were to compete in the day's finals. The matches had been postponed until 1 o'clock, Nancy's opponent, Miss Howard, explained. There seems to be some mix-up. That's entirely satisfactory to me, Nancy declared in relief. I really should prefer to play this afternoon. Bess and George suggested to their chum that she retire to her hotel room for a rest, but the girl had other plans. Taking her father's car, she drove first to the village, there to interview the postmistress. The woman was very glad to show Nancy the letters which she was holding for Margaret Judson. I believe Mortimer Bardescu wrote them all, the girl thought, as she studied the handwriting. At least, many of the characters resemble those which appear on my autographed ball. Now, I wonder... Nancy's second point of call was at the nearby college town of Andover. Selecting a bookstore directly across from the campus, she asked for a college register and was permitted to look at the latest record of students and instructors. Nancy ran rapidly through the list of professors, searching for one whose first name might be Morton. She felt highly elated when she came upon an instructor of philosophy named Morton Touche. Her confident feeling that she had located Miss Judson's former fiancé vanished, when in searching through the rest of the list she discovered two other Mortons, a Professor Hilburn and a man by the name of Wardell. I guess I shall have to call on all three, Nancy thought wearily. I'll have to hurry, too, or I'll not get back to the Deer Mountain Hotel in time for my golf match. Morton Touche was not difficult to locate. His office was listed as room 305 of the Liberal Arts Building. Nancy found the professor to be an elderly, white-haired gentleman of nearly 70 years of age. Since he could not by any stretch of the imagination be connected with so youthful a person as Margaret Judson, Nancy retreated without even revealing to him the purpose of her call. Professor Hilburn was not in his office. The girl spent many precious minutes trying to find his home in the residential section. Even before she rapped on the door of the neat little brick house, she suspected that she had made another mistake, for an upset kitty cart on the front porch gave mute evidence that the person she had come to see was not a single man. Mrs. Hilburn proved to be a charming middle-aged woman with 3 children, and she assured Nancy that she had been married for nearly 15 years. "I shouldn't have troubled you," the girl apologized. "The professor for whom I am searching is single, and I know only his first name, which is Morton." "I wonder if you could mean Professor Morton Wardell?" the woman inquired thoughtfully. "He's a single man, and not more than 30 years old, I should judge. He's the head of our zoology and botany departments." "I believe he must be the man for whom I'm looking," Nancy said eagerly. "Can you tell me how to reach his home?" "He has none of his own, but rooms on Melbourne Street." 10 minutes later found Nancy ringing the doorbell of a large colonial house. She was admitted by a pleasant, white-haired woman. "Professor Wardell isn't here just now," the landlady replied in response to Nancy's inquiry. "Sometimes he comes home for lunch, but I never can be certain. I stopped at his office, but he wasn't in. No, I doubt that he would be there today. He usually takes a hike somewhere into the woods. Professor Wardell is deeply interested in nature lore." Nancy was disappointed that she couldn't see the man, especially since she was inclined to believe that he might be the person she was seeking. Deciding to take the landlady into her confidence a little, she mentioned that she was trying to locate a man who was an acquaintance of Margaret Judson. "Oh, dear me! They were more than acquaintances," the woman replied quickly. "I am certain Professor Wardell and Miss Judson were engaged. But the marriage failed to take place. He hasn't seemed himself since. He's quiet and subdued. It makes my heart fairly ache to see him so sad, for I've never known a finer man." Nancy was now convinced that Morton Wardell was the person with whom she must talk, if she expected to solve the mystery which surrounded Margaret Judson's strange actions. She dared not tarry longer in Andover lest she be late for her golf match. "I should like to have you give Professor Wardell an important message," the girl requested the woman. "Yes, certainly." Nancy took a calling card from her purse. After writing the name of her hotel on it, she gave it to the woman. "Please ask Professor Wardell to see me at this address just as soon as he can. Tell him that I should like to talk with him about a most important matter." "I'll give him your message," the woman promised. "Professor Wardell is very obliging, so I feel certain he'll come to the hotel either tonight or tomorrow." While on her way back to the village, and then on to the Deer Mountain Hotel, Nancy reflected that her morning had been far from wasted. She thought it rather significant that both Professor Wardell and old Mr. Haley were interested in botany and zoology. "I wonder if there might not be a connection between the 2 men," she thought idly. Arriving at the hotel, Nancy barely had time to snatch a sandwich before she was due to appear at the first tee. Bess, George, Ned, and Mr. Drew were on hand to witness the start of the match, and smiled encouragingly as the girl stood quietly waiting her turn to drive off. "Bring home the silver 11 cup," George urged in a whisper. "We'll be pulling for you every bit of the way." "How does your hand feel?" Bess asked anxiously. "Pretty good," Nancy replied carelessly, for she knew that her chum still felt guilty about the accident of the previous evening. "The thing that worries me is the skill of my opponent. I'm afraid she'll defeat me." Miss Howard, a golfer well known throughout the state, had turned in a score of 89 for her semifinal match, which was a better one than Nancy had ever made. The Drew girl knew that if she expected to win the finals, she would have to shoot the best game of her life. She feared that with her hand paining her as it did, she might be unable to play even as well as usual. "I'll just do the best I can. Win or lose, I'll try to accept my fate gracefully," she told herself. Miss Howard made a long drive from the tee. Nancy's ball did not go as far, but ended up in perfect position. Both putted well when they reached the green, and the score was even. The second and third holes likewise were tied, making it evident to Nancy that the match promised to be a close one. At the fourth hole, she gained the advantage when Miss Howard's ball lodged in a bunker, but the fifth hole found them even again. On through the sixth and seventh they played, fighting grimly for the lead. So absorbed were both girls in their game that they scarcely noticed how overcast the sky had become. Black clouds rolled swiftly up from the west, blotting out the sun. The ninth hole, marking the halfway point of the match, left the girls still even. Miss Howard seemed as fresh as ever, and on the 10th tee drove out a ball which easily went 220 yards. "A beautiful drive," Nancy praised as she stepped forward to take her turn. She swung with all her strength, connecting squarely with the ball, but at the same instant a severe pain shot through her injured hand. Nancy suffered intensely, and it was all she could do to grip the club. As a result, her next shot was a dismal failure. Quick to seize an advantage, Miss Howard, playing beautiful golf, took the hole easily. The 11th likewise fell to her, and Nancy, 2 down, began to fear that the match was lost. "I can't give up," she told herself grimly. "I must ignore the pain and swing into each shot with all my strength." As the girls teed off at the 12th hole, a few drops of rain spattered against their faces. Miss Howard glanced anxiously at the sky. "It looks like a hard rain coming up," she declared nervously. "I'm afraid of storms." By the time the two reached the 12th green, it was raining steadily. In trying to hurry, Miss Howard missed her putt, and the hole went to Nancy, leaving her now only down 1. She must make up that point. The 13th and 14th, played in a drenching rain, were halved, leaving the score the same as before. By this time the wind had sprung up. As the girls made their way to the 15th tee, it was all they could do to maintain their balance. "This is terrible!" Miss Howard exclaimed. "Surely the committee can't expect us to finish our match in this kind of weather." "It's getting worse every minute, too," Nancy stated, drawing her thin sweater closer about her. "The main part of the storm hasn't even struck yet." Miss Howard hesitated a moment, then abruptly handed her driver to the caddy. "I'm going back to the hotel," she announced. "If the committee says we may continue the match tomorrow, all well and good. If not, then I'll default." "No, we'll stop play by mutual agreement," Nancy replied. "I feel certain no one would blame us for failing to finish under these conditions." The rain began to fall in torrents. Miss Howard, followed by the 2 caddies, ran as fast as she could toward the hotel. Nancy darted into the woods, and there, partly protected by the trees, made up her mind that the Haley cabin was closer than any other shelter. The wind was steadily rising, and as she ran through the woods, the tree boughs crashed together overhead. The air was filled with flying leaves, while now and then a dead limb came plunging downward. Approaching the haunted bridge, Nancy was startled to hear the same moaning sound which had been heard on a previous visit to the locality. "It must be the wind howling through the ravine," she told herself. "But regardless of what it is, I'll not turn back." Nancy reached the sagging bridge where the old scarecrow, wet and tattered, was dancing wildly in the wind. It seemed more ghost-like than ever, and as the girl hurried past, the spindly arms entwined themselves about her body. She shook herself free, and by a supreme effort pushed on. The bridge swayed in the wind. As Nancy reached midstream, it suddenly creaked and groaned. The underpinning had been torn away! As the structure swung around, Nancy clutched the railing for support, but it too was unsound. The decayed wood gave way, and the girl plunged violently forward to meet the turbulent waters of the swollen stream. End of chapter 18. Very dramatic. Very dramatic indeed. Sorry for stepping away. No, that's okay. Of course, Nancy will shoot the best game of her life. Oh my gosh, they really are going to go through the entirety of the course. Super dramatic golf music. Yeah. It's like the opposite of the football thing where they knew nothing about football and they obviously know a lot about golf. I'm gonna look up whether Mildred did golf. If I can find it. He's so cute. Was Mildred Wirt Benson, a golfer? Okay, this is on University of Iowa Libraries, which is where she went to college. It said George and Mildred Benson played golf together and went dancing. So she played golf with her husband. Yeah, she pursued golf. So this has to be her book. Which I should look at. Let's see if it says in the wiki. Which Nancy Drew books did Mildred Benson write? Mildred wrote books 1 through 17, 11 through 25, and 30 in the series from... Okay. So yeah, she did write this one. This is 15. That makes sense. So she obviously didn't know anything about football, but she knew a lot about golf. No wonder. Makes sense. Sorry I can't stay longer, but I've got a bunch of stuff to get done on my end. Thanks for the stream. Hope we can pop by some more in the future. I don't know if he's still here, but thank you for being here, Hugh. It's good to see you. Hope you have a productive day. Hope to see you later. I don't know. You fell asleep. Well, that's for you, to wake you up. And we determined that Millie did write this book, and she was a golfer. And I feel like I knew that about her, but yeah. She obviously was very passionate about it. Millie's so cute. I love Millie. She's great. I haven't decided, so I'm going to New York at the end of the end of August. Yeah, end of the month. It's August now. And we're flying into Newark, which is in New Jersey, and that's pretty close to the area where the Stratmeyers, however you say their name, did their work. And Harriet and Edward are buried in that area. So I haven't decided if this is too weird or if I'm not going to have enough time. And I don't know that Keegan would be interested at all, but I was thinking about like going to their grave sites. Is that weird? I mean, they were very like important people in children's literature. They really paved the way for books for young girls, and I feel like that's really important to me as a future librarian and a YA lover and a woman. And I don't know, I just thought it'd be cool. But I don't know, it's kind of weird. That would be cool. Okay, I like cemeteries. Yeah, and then we can spend some time like on the New Jersey side, so I can mark that state off my list, because I feel like if we just fly into New Jersey, I don't know if I really count that. Who cares if it's weird? Okay. Strange music. Okay, we shall continue. Chapter 19 is called An Unexpected Visitor. The current was swift, and before Nancy could battle her way to shore, she found herself carried far below the point where the haunted bridge had stood. Bedraggled, and with her clothes muddy and torn, she pulled herself out onto the slippery bank and sat there for a moment in the rain, trying to regain her breath. Bess warned me I'd get into trouble if I insisted upon coming here, she told herself ruefully. And I guess she was right. The old haunted bridge won the last laugh. Sorry, the music ended. I guess I'll play this.
Writing's not that easy.
Oh, shut up. Okay. Sorry about that. With her clothes thoroughly soaked and her hair plastered against her face, Nancy was anything but presentable. She scarcely knew whether or not to continue on to the Haley cabin. I'll never dare enter the hotel looking this way, she thought. I'll have to go somewhere and dry myself first. Nancy scrambled up the bank and followed the ravine trail to the cabin. Her firm knock brought Ned to the door. Why, Nancy, what has happened? He cried in astonishment. I thought you were playing your golf match. I was, the girl laughed as she stepped into the kitchen. But I decided to drop in for a moment and borrow an umbrella. Did you hear a loud crash a few minutes ago? Yes, we thought it sounded as if the bridge went down. It did, and I went with it. You should have seen me swimming down the ravine. Abandoning her bantering tone, Nancy added quickly, I'm surprised to find you here, Ned, for I understood you intended to stay at the hotel until the end of the golf match. I meant to, Nancy, but just after you teed off, Bill came to tell me I was needed here again. Mr. Haley is worse? He's been restless, and the boys don't like to be in the house alone with him. Bill and Bud are outside now trying to look after the animals. I should be helping them. I'll stay here with Mr. Haley, Nancy offered quickly. You look after the animals. Before Ned could protest, she had moved quietly to the adjoining bedroom to peer at the patient. At the moment, the man was resting peacefully, and judging from the appearance of his face, his condition remained unchanged. After Ned had donned a raincoat and left the cabin, Nancy tiptoed to a closet in search of warm garments. The only clothes available were a pair of slacks and an old blue shirt, a costume which gave her the appearance of a handsome boy. While she was hanging her own wet clothes by the stove to dry, she heard Mr. Haley stir restlessly and hastened back to his bedside. The old man's eyes were wide open. His gaze wandered slowly about the room and came to rest upon Nancy's face. Who are you? He said in a whisper. What are you doing here? I am Nancy Drew, and I have come to help you. The old man shook his head in a baffled manner. Nancy's a girl's name, he mumbled. You're a boy. This house is filled with boys. Why are they in my cabin? Nancy tried to explain the situation to him, but Mr. Haley did not wish to listen. He raised himself on an elbow, motioning her to assist him from his bed. No, you must remain quiet, Nancy told him firmly. You must not get up until the doctor says you may. But I have to. My animals will starve. How long have I been ill? Now, don't get excited, Nancy said soothingly. Everything's all right. Your animals are being well fed and cared for by friends. Just lie back on your pillow and try to get some rest. Her words reassured Mr. Haley, and he obediently remained quiet for several minutes. However, his eyes kept roving to her face, and she knew he was trying to rationalize the situation. Nancy was eager to ask the old man some questions, but she knew she should do nothing which would excite him. Until the doctor should determine that he was past danger of a relapse, she must not even mention Margaret Judson's name to him. Presently, Mr. Haley fell into a peaceful sleep. By the time Ned and his chums came in out of the storm, Nancy was able to report that she considered the patient well on the road to recovery. "That's good news," Ned said in obvious relief. "To tell you the truth, Bud and Bill and I have been pretty closely confined here. We'd like to have a chance to see the sights of Deer Mountain before our vacation is over." "It was good of you boys to help us out the way you did." "Oh, we wanted to do it," Ned said hastily, fearing that Nancy might misunderstand. As the storm subsided, the boys listened eagerly to an account of the day's golf match. They were disappointed that play had ended on the 15th hole with Nancy 1 down, but they were confident she would defeat her opponent when the match should be resumed. After the rain ceased, Ned and his friends set off for the ravine to view the fallen bridge. They found that it had floated some distance downstream and was lodged against an old log. Returning to the cabin for ropes and tools, they set about the task of pulling the structure back into place and anchoring it securely. During the absence of the boys, Nancy donned her own clothes. Then, thoroughly worn out from her strenuous day, she sat down in a chair by Mr. Haley's bedside and fell asleep. She was aroused by hearing a knock on the door. "I wonder who it can be," she asked herself as she arose to answer the summons. Ned or the boys wouldn't bother to rap. She opened the door to face a tall, handsome man who appeared to be about 30 years of age. Evidently, he had not expected to see a girl at the cabin, for he stared at Nancy and then quickly lowered his eyes as if aware that he was being rude. I beg your pardon," he said politely. "Is Mr. Haley at home?" "Yes, but I'm not sure that he can see a visitor," Nancy responded. "He was injured in an accident and is confined to his bed." "Oh, are you a nurse?" the man questioned in alarm. "I had no idea anything was wrong here, or I'd have come before this. Mr. Haley isn't in grave danger, is he?" "He's recovering now." "That's good," the man said in relief. "Do you think I might see him for a few minutes? My name is Wardell, and Mr. Haley is my uncle." Nancy was taken completely by surprise. Recovering quickly, she invited the young man to enter the cabin. "Mr. Haley is sleeping now," she explained, "but when he awakens, you may be able to speak with him for a moment." "I'd rather not do it if you feel it would excite him," Mr. Wardell said anxiously. "I think the world of my uncle. He practically reared me, and it was through him that I became interested in nature lore. I've always felt that I might never have entered my chosen field if it hadn't been for Mr. Haley." Nancy asked a few polite questions concerning the man's work. Although now she was perfectly aware that he was a professor at Andover College, she preferred not to reveal her knowledge to him. "I came over to the Deer Mountain Hotel this afternoon to see a young woman who requested me to call upon an important matter," the caller explained. "Apparently it could not have been very important, for she wasn't even waiting for me." "Hi, Boo." "Hi." "Since I was so nearby, I thought I'd drop over and see my uncle, never dreaming that he'd been injured. Can you tell me about the accident?" Nancy supplied details and then switched the subject back to Professor Wardell's work at the college. Ooh. She wished to bring Margaret Judson's name into the conversation, yet she scarcely knew how to do so without appearing abrupt. "When Mr. Haley first was injured, we were afraid he had no living relatives," she remarked, watching the young man closely. "However, I did find a picture of a beautiful girl here in the cabin, but there was no way positively to establish her identity." She found the photograph of Margaret Judson and placed it in Professor Wardell's hands. The young man stared at it without speaking. The expression of deep anguish upon his face made Nancy feel almost sorry that she had shown it to him. "From Mr. Haley's remarks when he was semi-conscious, I gathered that he knew this girl well," she said casually. "Seemingly, she lived near here and fled when her home burned." "Yes, that's true." The professor kept his gaze averted. "Perhaps you recognize the picture?" Could I ever forget it? The young man asked, his voice husky with emotion. Margaret Judson and I were engaged to be married. Oh, I'm sorry. You couldn't have known, the man said quickly, little suspecting that Nancy deliberately had opened the old wound. I was away on a scientific expedition at the time Margaret's house was destroyed by fire. Everything was lost. Everything? Nancy inquired in disappointment. Well, she did save a box of jewelry. Professor Wardell smiled grimly. Among other things, it contained the engagement ring I had given her. How fortunate, Nancy murmured. It was anything but fortunate. In her flight, Margaret lost the box. She left a note for me, saying that while she loved me dearly, she must break our engagement. I couldn't understand her actions then, and I cannot now. Why should she refuse to marry me just because the ring was lost? I'd be only too happy to buy Margaret a dozen rings. Perhaps she was afraid he would be angry. The ring was a valuable one, I admit, but I'm sure Margaret knew me well enough to realize that I'd not blame her for something which obviously couldn't have been her fault. I've tried to locate her, but after the fire, she disappeared. I'd give anything to find her again. Nancy was tempted to tell the young man that she believed Miss Judson to be somewhere in the vicinity of Deer Mountain, but she wisely decided not to build up any false hopes in his mind. She felt fairly certain the carved chest which had come into her possession was the lost property of the young woman, and she rather suspected, too, that she knew the reason why Margaret Judson had broken her engagement. Nancy liked Professor Wardell very much and was eager to help him. However, she thought that her father should be the one to decide how much information should be revealed to him. After you have visited your uncle for a few minutes, I'd like to have you come with me to the Deer Mountain Hotel, Nancy told the man cordially. I'm very eager to have you meet my father. I'd be delighted to talk with him, Professor Wardell said politely, especially since I'd like to thank him for being so kind to my uncle. However, I must confess I don't know his name, or yours either for that matter. Nancy enjoyed the young man's look of astonishment as she replied with a smile. I happen to be the girl who asked you to call at the Deer Mountain Hotel. My name is Nancy Drew. End of chapter 19. For whatever reason, I pictured Wardell as Benedict. Hey, boo-boo. What you doing? Ew. Ew. What you doing, baby? You want to say hi to people on the stream? No? I can't even see her. Ooh! There's her little face. Boo-boo. This is difficult. Ooh. Say hi. There's your pretty face. Okay, now you're disappearing. Anyways. Pirouettes. Unexpected visitor. I hope it's the Grim Reaper. Nancy napping. Good, Nancy. Good. Read that in an evil tone for some reason and imagined you were petting a small animal in your arms while saying it. Wisp. Yes. V has the correct spelling there. Man, V is a soloist. Dang French words. You are not stupid. It is a hard word. I googled it. Ooh. Okay. V says hi. He's just like, I don't care. Pet my head. Scratch my ears. Scratch my ears, Mom. V is the sweetest kitty. V is the sweetest kitty in the world. Surprise, V! You're a cat. Boo. Boo is a cat. V is a human. V is a very sweet human. Boo is the sweetest cat in the world. I am kinda hungry. You hungry? What are you hungry for? Do I have any... Here, I have a derp. I'm a kitty! I have a derpy kitty. Look, there's a sip. Yeah. Anyways, surprise! Today's stream we learned that V is a cat. Ooh! Lots of useful emotes. Yes, I think they are. I got gifted a $25 tier sub, so I got all the emotes. The tier 3 sub. Lots of Discord notifications. Okay, bye, Boo. Meow. She's disappointed. Okay. Shall I continue on with chapter 20? It's called Gathering Evidence. You are Nancy Drew? Professor Wardell stammered, taken back by the girl's revelation of her identity. Why did you send for me? Have you learned anything about Margaret Judson? I found something which I think may belong to her, Nancy replied. Not the box of jewelry. I can't tell you now. You must talk with my father first. The professor did not press Nancy further for an explanation. However, after they had conversed for a few minutes, he did ask her permission to enter Mr. Haley's bedroom. His uncle was still asleep, so after standing by the bedside for a short time, the man quietly returned to the kitchen. Presently, Ned, Bud, and Bill trudged wearily in, spent by their attempt to repair the bridge. They reported to Nancy that while they had it in fairly good condition, considerable work yet remained to be done on it, and the structure was not very safe. You'll not be able to cross the ravine in returning to your hotel, Ned told her. I'll drive you back in my car. Thank you, Ned, but that won't be necessary. Professor Wardell has promised to take me in his automobile, which is parked up by the old Judson estate. The boys had failed to observe the stranger, for he had been sitting quietly in a dark corner of the room. They were therefore somewhat embarrassed as they responded to an introduction. Ned could not help but glance at the man a trifle jealously, wondering at his apparent friendship with Nancy. Even the information that the man was Mr. Haley's nephew did not satisfy him entirely. He felt that she displayed a decided eagerness to have the professor escort her back to the hotel in his stead. Well, yeah, it's Benedict Cumberbatch. Nancy gladly would have revealed the facts in the case to Ned, but with Bud and Bill hovering so near, an explanation was out of the question. In leaving the cabin, she gave the boy a warm smile and bade him take good care of the patient. I don't seem to be of much use at anything else, Ned muttered, turning away. During the drive back to the Deer Mountain Hotel, Nancy was troubled by her friend's attitude, but she soon dismissed the matter from her mind. She knew that she would be able to take Ned into her confidence before another day should elapse. Leaving Professor Wardell in the hotel lobby, she sought her father, who was in his room. Dad, she cried, bursting in upon him. I'm almost certain that the carved chest which I found in the ravine is Miss Judson's missing property. I've just met Professor Wardell, the young woman's former fiancé, and I want you to talk to him. If you feel that he can be trusted, let's take him into our confidence." "I'd very much like to meet this young man," Carson Drew replied after he had heard his daughter's story. "Bring him here to my room, where we can talk things over privately." Nancy was not disappointed at the outcome of the interview, for the two men took an immediate liking to each other. She was secretly elated when her father broached the topic of his search for Miss Judson. "I appreciate your opinion, sir," Professor Wardell said respectfully after he had listened to a summary of the evidence against the young woman, "but I cannot believe that Miss Judson knows anything about the missing jewels. She was always such an honorable person and comes from a fine family. I cannot conceive that she can have any connection with an international gang of thieves." "That's my opinion exactly," Nancy declared, nodding vigorously. "Nevertheless, there are a few clues which seem to connect her with the affair," Mr. Drew commented, hoping to gain additional information from the professor. "For instance, a jeweled vanity case. Do you know if Miss Judson had one?" "Not to my knowledge, although she was very fond of jewelry. To tell you the truth, I never noticed particularly." "Another question. Have you ever heard Miss Judson speak of a man by the name of Mortimer Bartescue?" "Why, yes. I seem to recall that he was an acquaintance of hers. I believe she met him in Europe." Nancy and her father exchanged quick glances. Here was information which tended to link the young woman with the jewel smuggling case. Of course, it had not been proved that Mortimer Bartescue was a crook, but the various methods he used to alter his handwriting tended to suggest strongly that he was a fugitive from justice. "Is Mortimer Bartescue under suspicion?" Professor Wardell questioned anxiously. "Yes," Carson Drew answered gravely, "but so far the evidence against him is purely circumstantial. If only we could find Miss Judson, she might be able to clear up the mystery surrounding both of them." I have no idea where Miss Judson can be now," the professor replied thoughtfully. "She might be staying with a cousin at Rock City." "You never investigated the lead yourself?" Nancy inquired in surprise. "No," the man answered in a low tone. "You see, I didn't want to force my attentions upon Miss Judson. However, I still believe that if I could talk with her, everything might be explained and cleared up. I don't feel that I should seek her out deliberately without some indication from her that she would like to see me again." "I understand how you feel," Nancy said sympathetically. The hour was growing late. Professor Wardell arose to leave, for he was already late for an important meeting. "I should like to keep in touch with you," Carson Drew said as he escorted the young man to the door. "Yes, indeed, I'll be waiting eagerly to hear from you again, Mr. Drew. Your daughter has my address at Andover. When I'm not there, I usually can be reached at my office in the Science Hall. If you receive any news of Miss Judson, I shall appreciate deeply being notified." After the professor had gone, Nancy and her father discussed the case for a few minutes, but were unable to reach any conclusion as to the innocence or guilt of Mortimer Bartescue. His association with Margaret Judson actually proved nothing, for as yet they had established no case against the young woman. "In spite of all the evidence against her, I can't help but believe, as does Professor Wardell, that she had nothing to do with the jewel theft," Nancy declared confidently. "That was also your opinion at first, Dad." "Quite true," the lawyer nodded. "I admit this case has me baffled, for never before have I encountered one with so many contradictory features." Presently, Mr. Drew and his daughter gave up trying to figure out the puzzle, turning their attention to another pressing matter. During her brief stay at Mr. Haley's cabin, Nancy had observed that many articles were needed to make the patient more comfortable. She suggested to her father that they drive out before dinner, taking with them the necessary supplies. The car was loaded with groceries as well as other articles, including a few good books which Nancy thought Ned and his chums might enjoy reading. "I'm afraid they've been having a pretty dull time of it since coming to Deer Mountain," she told her father regretfully. "This afternoon when I talked with Ned, he seemed especially blue." "The boys deserve a little outing," Mr. Drew replied. "We'll see. Perhaps I can help with that a bit." Ned was alone with the patient when Nancy and her father reached the cabin. He explained that Bud and Bill were down at the ravine, working on the footbridge. A short time later, the boys came trudging in, tired and hungry, but pleased to report that they had finished the repairs. Nancy set about preparing a warm meal. Later, the boys declared that it was the first really good cooking they had tasted since they had left River Heights. "How would you fellows like to have the evening off?" Carson Drew inquired after the dishes had been cleared away. "I'll be glad to stay here with Mr. Haley if you think you would like a little fun." "Say, that would be great!" Ned exclaimed. "Is there a dance at the hotel tonight, Nancy?" "Yes, there is. I imagine Bess and George would like to attend it too." "Then we'll make it a party!" Ned declared enthusiastically. "Come on, fellows, let's change into our dancing duds." While the boys were making themselves presentable for the party, Nancy and her father sat with old Mr. Haley in the adjoining room. "How are you feeling?" Mr. Drew questioned gently as he observed that the patient's eyes were open. "Better," the old man responded in a low voice. "Only weak." "That is to be expected," Nancy said soothingly. "You've been very ill." She did not wish to excite Mr. Haley by saying any more, but he seemed to want her to talk. "Oh, thank you for the host." He asked the day of the week, as well as various other questions which were answered for him. Finally, Nancy walked over to the table. Picking up Miss Judson's photograph, she handed it to the sick man. "Would you like to have me place this picture near you where you can see it?" she inquired gently. "Yes, please do," Mr. Haley answered in faltering tones. "Miss Margaret, isn't she here now?" "Miss Judson has never come to the cabin. She does not know that you've been ill." "Then it was a dream. I thought she was sitting beside me, holding my hand." "Perhaps you confused me with Miss Judson," Nancy said quietly. "Tell me, did you work for her at the old mansion?" "Oh, yes. I took care of the trees and the garden and the flowers about the place. I was employed by the Judsons for nearly 10 years. After Miss Margaret's parents died, she didn't have as much money as before, but she kept me there just the same." A tear glistened in Mr. Haley's eyes as he thought of the happy years which were no more. Several moments elapsed before he spoke again. "Miss Margaret was good and kind," he told his listeners. "She never once spoke a harsh word to me in all the years I knew her. That's why it hurt me to see her so unhappy." "Miss Judson was very unhappy?" Nancy prompted as the old man fell into another meditative silence. "Yes. After her parents died, she was very lonely. She was to have been married, but the awful fire came and all her plans were changed." "In what way do you mean?" Carson Drew inquired, leaning eagerly toward the bed. "I don't know," Mr. Haley murmured wearily. "Something happened. I never learned just what it was. Miss Margaret was greatly upset about the fire. She ran away." "And you have never seen her since?" Nancy questioned softly. "She came back to my cabin once to ask me to search for something she'd lost. But I couldn't find it. I hunted everywhere. I told her that later, and she never came again." Mr. Haley closed his eyes and turned his face toward the wall. Nancy and her father longed to ask him other questions, but they dared not, cognizant of the fact that the old man was spent from his efforts at speaking. "I want to see Miss Margaret," he mumbled feebly a few minutes later. Then he dropped off into a sound slumber. Before Carson Drew and Nancy could discuss the information Mr. Haley had given them, Ned, Bud, and Bill came into the bedroom. "We're ready to leave, Nancy," Ned announced in a whisper. "How do you like my new suit?" "You look handsome in it," Nancy praised, without noting in detail what he wore. "I'll get my hat and coat." As the young people were leaving the cabin together, Ned observed that his companion was strangely silent. "Don't you feel well tonight, Nancy?" he inquired anxiously. "There's really nothing wrong with me, Ned. I was just thinking. Not about that fellow Mortimer, I hope." Nancy laughed as she shook her head. "No, I happened to be wondering about Margaret Judson again. Ned, I must find her." "That's easier said than done." "Yes, but I believe she's somewhere near here." Ned glanced curiously at Nancy. Her next words astonished him even more, for with a quiet intensity in her voice she added, "It may sound silly to you, Ned, but I have a strange feeling. Call it intuition, if you will. Tonight, I know I shall find Miss Judson." End of chapter 20. So, I hate to say it, but like, as I'm reading this, ever since I was like, that guy, I picture him as Benedict, I'm like creating an adaptation for a film in my head and like casting people. I think if we moved this to Scotland, where they play a lot of golf, and you could put it in like a countryside area where there could be a cabin and a wood that's creepy, and cast a bunch of British people, I think it would be cool. Is that weird? Does anybody else see it? Welcome for clapping. Thank you for clapping. Who is Benedict? Oh, this guy, the Professor Wardell. Actually, here, I'll pull up a picture of what I'm thinking. If I can find it. It's very specific. Well, there's a video, but this is what I'm... Okay, well that's a good picture of it. So that's what I'm picturing when I picture Professor Ward. It's from the SNL skit that's really weird, but that's what I'm picturing. I don't know, he's just very, like, nice and dapper and intellectual, and distraught by being in love with this woman who denied him. So yeah, I'm wondering if Mortimer Bardescu should be David Tennant. Is that weird? This, like, handsome guy that's being creepy.
Writing's not that easy.
Oh, shut up.
Really can help.
Shut up, you stupid.
This sentence is grammatically
Hi, boo. Hi, baby. Yeah, I'm, like, casting this in my head. Jessica! Yeah. Yeah, I've been rewatching the first season, so that's why. Okay, lots of useful emotes. Gather that evidence. Oh, poor Ned. Well, back to important matters is what I heard. Yes, I believe he was a grill master, that Morty fella. Check for charcoal. Sniff for propane. Until the next book. Then the next book, and the next book. How lucky that the hotel is randomly having a dance. I know, right? What a great coincidence. Dancing duds. Thank you for shouting out, Lexi and V. We also need a shout out for Dr. Terror, House O' Horror. Last playing Songbird Symphony. I added it to my wish list on Steam. Hi, boo-boo. Hi. Oh, the professor. Hello, dear. Hello. I don't know, can you see it? V just didn't want to shout me out. It's fine. Hey, boo-boo. How many chapters do we have left? This book. 25. Yep. We have 8. This is 25 chapters, and I just got to chapter 21. Maybe I should leave it there. Oh, it doesn't. I was waiting for her to do the talking. Okay, so I cheered an uneven number and it's bugging me. Well, thank you for cheering. Thank you for the bits. I appreciate it. 400 is better. You're fine, V. I did it for you. Welcome for being number 1, Lexi. Yeah, okay. So, I'm gonna leave it there for today and finish the book at a different stream. But with the remaining time, but now you're at 31 for the week. It was just like, what are you doing, Mom? With the remaining time, I'm going to build a cast list. Okay, so what are the characters that we have here? We have, obviously, Nancy, George and Bess, Carson, Ned, Morty, Mortimer Bardescu, Joe Haley, Professor Wardell, Margaret Judson. I assume she will be here someday. She's at least voiced in before freestyle drum session to end the stream. The caddy, Sammy, Mrs. Sutter, or his mother, whoever his mother is. Bill and Bud, or whatever the Ned's friends. I feel like those are the main people. Am I missing anyone else? Sorry. I feel like those are the main people. Main cast of characters. Taking place in, put Scotland. So we have to cast James McAvoy in this too, right? I guess he could be the uncle. But he'd be like a younger uncle. I don't know, that wouldn't work because Benedict would be his nephew. I'll have to research some golf courses. What young Scottish actor would be Sammy? Young Scottish actors. Meet the new generation of Scottish actors. Rising male British actors under 30. Sure. In October 2014. Ooh, it could be Freddie Highmore. He's English, but I could see that. He's pretty young looking. He has a baby face. Oh, there's that cute kid. It's the kid from Love Actually, Thomas Brody Sangster. Except he's Keegan's age now. Oh, that makes me feel old. Ooh, Nicholas Hoult could be somebody. Ooh, Nicholas Hoult could also be the professor. We could make this a stage play and have different casts. Tom Felton could also be Mortimer Bardescu, I feel like. It kind of depends on the age that we want to go for. There are a lot of people from Harry Potter on this list. I need more Scottish people. Oh, this guy. The young Alan Turing. He could be, he could be Sammy. But they're all gonna have to do fake Scottish accents. Tom Holland could... Oh, Greg Sulkin. I always forget that he's English. Too many people. Why am I such an Anglophile? Ooh, he'd be good too. This guy who was on Victoria. This list is really long. There's a guy from Stranger Things on this that is apparently English. I'm just writing people. I don't know what the point of this is, but it's fun. But all of these people are white. I need more people of color. Who could be Greg? Who could Greg be? Greg Sulkin could be one of the bros. I love Greg. He's great. His English or his American accents are usually pretty good. Who was the other person? Rick. Now I can't think of his name. Freddie Highmore. What am I missing in chat? It's fun to cast books. That's all I've missed. Okay. Does anyone have any suggestions? Best Scottish actors working today.
A great sword of this magnitude can only be achieved when both the warrior and
Gerard Butler's Scottish. This is true.
when this relationship isn't achieved,
He could be the uncle.
becomes nothing more than an evil weapon serving no one.
He could be the uncle.
For that reason, I'm selective about whom I'll work for. I simply have no other choice.
I see.
Ewan McGregor, James McAvoy,
In all your years forging weapons for other warriors,
Liam Neeson could be the uncle.
have inspired you to create such a weapon.
Let me think. I guess in all my years doing this, I'd have to say that there has been just one person who
Alan Cumming.
the pinnacle of his craft as a warrior.
So, then you have come across a warrior that
Alan Cumming could be a good Mortimer.
For him, I forged the finest blade I could, employing all the skills I had available at the time.
I don't know what this dialogue is.
As a fellow swordsman, I must admit I'm curious. So, what more can you tell us about him?
Billy Boyd. Oh, Billy Boyd. Henry and Ian Cusick. Love him as well. Need more characters. Why are these all white people? Ian DeCaster. Robert Pattinson is not overrated. He's actually an incredibly good actor. It's just because he's in Twilight that people give him a bad name. I'm sorry. Scottish actresses. Ooh, Miranda, what's her face? Oh, Karen Gillan. For Margaret Judson. My problem is these are all white people. But I guess, well, I don't know. Tilda Swinton's Scottish? How did I not know that? She could be the mom. Phyllis Logan. I love Phyllis Logan. Guys, we could make we could make the next Nancy Drew movie that people would be mad about because it's never right. Okay, but I'm also kind of thinking Saoirse Ronan. Even though she's Irish, for Margaret Judson. Or we could do Katie Long. She is Scottish. And she's so cute. She's older than I give her credit for. She's 31. That'd be good for Margaret Judson. And then we'd have a not white person. That'd be nice. I'm enjoying this. I don't know if I'm boring anyone else, but gotta roll out. Thanks for stream. Thank you for being here, Terry. I appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of your day. The hardest part is obviously casting Nancy, George, Bess, Carson, Drew, and Ned. And they're gonna be obviously American. And that's always the hardest part that people will never be happy with, because you can't make everyone happy with such iconic characters. Although I feel like Carson is somewhat easier to cast because he's needs to look like a dad. Actors that look like dads. That's no. Fatherly actors. "27 of TV's best father figures who weren't actually dads." Aw, Joey from Full House. Mr. Feeney. These are old. These are not. Aw, Craig. Keith Scott from One Tree Hill. I think Jeff Daniels would actually make a good Carson. Not exactly what I'm going for, but I could see it. Okay. I don't know. V, do you have any actors that you could see as our main, our stars? Have you ever thought about that? I do think I like the casting for the new Nancy Drew show I don't know if it's out yet, the teen one that people are looking down on that I actually think looks good. That cast looked cool. Nick Offerman? I'm sorry, but hi Riddy! I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of Nick Offerman. But if there was a character that I'd cast for him, he would be Carson. But I'd like somebody a little bit more older, that has an older fatherly feel. But hi Riddy, welcome to the end of the stream. I am just casting the Haunted Bridge because I think it'd make a good movie, and guess what? I'm going to move it to Scotland. I'm going to make an adaptation. They're going to be at a golf resort in the countryside in Scotland, and lots of Scottish actors, so I want David Tennant to be Mortimer Bardescu, but obviously Benedict is going to be the Professor Wardell. I don't know if you got to hear his entrance into the story, but I'm definitely thinking the SNL skit with him as a professor, that weird one where he's like trying to kiss the male student or whatever, definitely that's Benedict for the professor. But I'm not going to require him to do a Scottish accent. I think being a professor in Scotland who's English, I think that'll work. Well, nice. I just don't know about, like, you know, our main American cast. I know! I want James McAvoy, but I don't know who I'd cast him as. I don't know who I'd cast him as. I probably need to list some more characters, but he's not old enough to be the weird, decrepit uncle. But Margaret Judson, the elusive run-through character. Okay, so Nancy George Bess, Carson, Ned, obviously those are our American cast members. Although, you know what? I could see Greg Sulkin being Ned. He does a good American accent. He's always cast as Americans. I never hear his actual accent. He's really good in, like, teen shows. He always gets typecast for teen shows, even though he's, like, our age. Mortimer Bardescu. He can be a run-through character. What do you mean? I'm sorry. My problem is I only have one person of color on this entire list. For Margaret Judson, Katie Lung. She'd be great. McAvoy, if you didn't have a big role for him. Bess, George, and Nancy are always the hardest to cast. Never mind. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm going to leave the stream there. I will finish off the book, the last 5 chapters, the next read stream. I'll have to make my schedule soon for next week. I'm not sure when I will stream next. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for putting up with my shenanigans. You don't need to cast Nancy, she's the camera. She is the camera! Okay, sounds good. So anyways, thanks for being here. I'll see you guys the next time, and we will finish the Haunted Bridge. Excited to finish it. I really like this book. And I will see you all next time. Have a good weekend. Much love from me to you, as we would say. And take care. Bye.